Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 1982 Lucio Fulci film, Manhattan Baby. I'm going through the Shudder Fulci films that they just put on for October. So I already did Demonia. Now I'm doing Manhattan Baby. And then the next one will be Enigma. And then I will be done with that. I'll be moving on to some Giallo films after that. So like I said, directed by Lucio Fulci, who also did A Lizard on a Woman's Skin, Don't Torture a Duckling, Zombie, The New York Ripper, A Cat in the Brain, and Enigma, just to name a few, but there's a lot. Very prolific. The script for this film was written by Elisa Briganti, who also did scripts for Zombie, 1990 The Bronx Warriors, The Exterminators of the Year 3000, and A Blade in the Dark, just to name a few. And Dardano Sacchetti, as people say Sacchetti. I like to say Sacchetti, though. Dardano Sacchetti, who was married to Elisa Briganti, so, husband, wife, working together on scripts, kind of cool. He's done so many scripts. He has like over 200 writing credits on IMDb, but some of the ones you might know. Demons, Demons 2, 1990 The Bronx Warriors, The Scorpion with Two Tails, A Bay of Blood, Cat o' Nine Tails, The New York Ripper, and The Psychic. So he worked with Fulci a few times. He worked with Argento. He worked with a lot of people. Also released as Eye of the Evil Dead in the United States. That's what this one was called. It wasn't Manhattan Baby in the US. It was Eye of the Evil Dead. And in the UK, it was released as The Possessed, which that's the title that obviously makes the most sense for what's actually going on in the film. The budget, this is heartbreaking, in my opinion. When I read this, I was like, no. The budget was apparently cut in half during production, which kept Fulci from using more special effects that he wanted to create a more ethereal film. He actually didn't really like how this film came out because of that issue. He had much bigger, better plans, and like I said, to make it more ethereal, which would have helped a lot, because you can see where he's trying to get there in the film, but just isn't getting there, especially because like the effects don't look that great. He could have gone bigger. He could have done so much more. It's definitely one of those instances where you're like, damn, the studio, like what this film could have been. It could have been something much better. But as it is, I don't hate it. With Fulci films, especially like the ones that aren't that great, you can almost always count on having like at least one kind of like big nuts, gore, I was going to say gore-inducing. No, I would hope not. Gore-filled scene, and this one obviously has it at the end, which I'll talk about when I kind of get to that point. The Egyptian locations in this look amazing. They're shot extremely well, and that just speaks to one of the main things with this film is that it looks really good. I mean, it's Lucio Fulci. It's 1982. He's been directing films for decades at this point, so, obviously he knows what he's doing. So yeah, I mean, it looks really good. And it really shows, and just these Egyptian locations are just beautiful on their own, but then when you add, like, the nice eye of Fulci to it, they look even better. So I like the beginning of it, and that setting. Too bad we don't stay there, just saying. The draining sand is a really cool way to signal the release of the evil spirit. Obviously, there are other, like, moments of foreshadowing where they're showing the scorpion that they find in the beginning, a black scorpion at that. And then they're also finding that snake that's in the tomb that they disturb and release the curse from. And obviously the scorpion and the snake end up coming back later, as does the draining sand. So kind of setting the stage for this is extremely foreboding and foreshadowing with foreboding. Just saying. Immediately, the music is great in this because, Fabio Frizzi. That's why. The score is phenomenal. Fabio Frizzi, if you don't know the name, familiarize yourself with his scores. Phenomenal. Awesome. Yeah. Love it, love it, love it. Uh-oh, messed up and opened a tomb that's said to be cursed. Of course, this film goes nowhere unless that were to happen, but I just think it's kind of funny where, the person's kind of like, oh no, you open this, it's rumored to be cursed, basically. And it's like, where was this guy before they opened the tomb? You know what I mean? Like, why is he saying it after the fact? He seemed like a person who didn't just show up. He seemed like he was someone who was kind of like a part of things from the get-go. So he could have come forward with this very pertinent information. But then again, people usually don't believe in that stuff, especially not in films. The blue lasers shooting into George's eyes made me chuckle. They look ridiculous. And all of those types of special effects look ridiculous within this film. And like the one where like it's like the amulet with the Egyptian eye on it, where it's like a blue dot that then like grows and like engulfs the whole screen. That's another one that made me chuckle because I'm like, this looks so bad. Also laughed when George put his sunglasses on over his gauze-covered eyes, because those blue lasers shooting into his eyes didn't end up being LASIKs for him. It ends up being what blinded him, although he gets his vision back later. But the blinding then, and he's getting his eyes checked, which there's a lot of focus on eyes in this film, which is something that Fulci has done a lot of in his career. And it's also been like an old Italian film thing, a lot of focus on eyes, especially in giallo films, even though this is not a giallo film though. But yeah, I just found it hilarious. He like puts his sunglasses on and it's like, okay. I mean, I guess he came there with them, so he feels like that's the best way to leave with them, I guess. But it just looked hilarious to me. They just laze those sunglasses over the gauze and they're like sticking out around the glasses. It's just too much. I loved it. And yes, Tommy, the character of Tommy, is played by Giovanni Frezza, who also played Bob in The House by the Cemetery. A lot of people who watched the Joe Bob Last Drive-In cover of The House by the Cemetery got really mad about Bob, and here he is again, not being what he was in that other movie. Susie's cross necklace being replaced by the Egyptian eye amulet is a clue that the spirit has kind of taken over. That's something that's very kind of not subtly, but it's pointed out by another kid who's kind of like, oh, where's your cross? And then you see she actually has the Egyptian amulet instead of her Christian cross on. And that's kind of symbolizing this body no longer belongs to that religion. It no longer belongs to God, to Jesus, whatever you want to say. It belongs to this other entity, this ancient Egyptian entity that is evil, obviously, and we find that out. Although we suspect that from the beginning, let's be honest, because, knowing what the film is. The scene where Tommy walks like a zombie through the glowing doorway shows that Susie isn't fully possessed at this point, because she ends up yelling a few times, "Not Tommy." So she's still there enough to know that there's something going on and she doesn't want it to go on. Now that scene, at first I was like, after it happened and then he was back, I was like, was that a dream? But no, it's actually not, because he talks about going on his journey much later in the film. He actually went somewhere and then, came back. But other people who do that don't end up living. I think maybe it's just because he was a young, innocent person. Maybe. I don't know. The sequence with Jamie Lee walking around the house when the power goes out is made more intense by the fact that they drop the score during this moment. Now, there are those nice moments within this film a few times where they drop the score to kind of like increase tension. And in that way, it really lets kind of sound design take the forefront and kind of it puts you a little more on edge, especially in a scene that's shot like that, where you're kind of like, ooh, I think I heard a noise. Like, what's that? Instead of having the music trying to tell you what you should already be expecting. The noises that they make for the snake sounded really odd and really funny, and I laughed at those too. There were plenty of times during this film that I wasn't supposed to be laughing, that I was laughing. I'm not going to say it's full on like a so bad it's good film, but I could see where some people would view it that way. I'm like on the fence on that one. I'm kind of like borderline. The elevator scene is cool. I really like that. The guy in the elevator who dies in there, when the floor kind of like starts sinking and then it like totally falls out and he just falls through the floor. Like, I didn't expect that. It looked cool. I like how they pulled that off, because you see it like starting to break away from the bottom of the elevator first, so that like kind of makes it more intense of a moment. It doesn't happen like suddenly, so like it's coming and the character knows it's coming, and that just makes it a better scene. The shot of Luke's face when he's lying dead in the desert, another moment I laughed. It's just like this, I don't know if I did that right, but Just so hilarious. And the way they like focus on it, like not only focusing on eyes in this film was a big thing, but like just face, just like close-ups of faces is another big thing, which, you know, the eyes are there too, so. And I like how George thinks that Luke is pulling a prank with all the sand in the bedroom and disappearing, because that makes sense. George. Jeez, George. How would he get all the sand in there? And how would he just disappear like that? I don't know. It's a weird thing. Obviously, there's translation differences too, so that might not be what the actual dialogue was in the film, but this is a version of the film I'm able to see. Susie's handprint that ends up being seared into her bed sheets, thought that was kind of cool. How her hand's right there, and then they have like the smoke coming up through the sheet, and then she moves it, and it's like this, you know, black mark that's singed into the sheet of her, you know, in the shape of her hand. Totally cool. Another indicator that, you know, there's evil inhabiting her body. All the picture of Susie picks up is the amulet. This must mean at this point that she is fully possessed. That was my reading of that scene where, you know, I think it's Jamie Lee like takes the picture of her, and then she looks at the picture and all that's there is the amulet. It's like the amulet is now all that exists, or what was inside the amulet or tied to the amulet. And there's really no Susie anymore because she's fully possessed at this point. Gotta love the Cobra POV shots, and even the moment when it strikes Wyler. That was funny because you see it like on the ground kind of like moving, and then like it even moves with the snake strikes, like the bite strikes on Wyler. Just funny. Like he did something similar in Demonia with a hammer, which, you know, the snake POV is a way better one than like a hammer POV, especially because a hammer's not alive. Like the snake POV actually makes some sense, but it's kind of played funny to me. So another moment where I laughed. I like how when George and Emily visit Mercado, he's being as creepy as he can be. The way he talks is just a really like scary, creepy way. But then he also happens to be like stuffing an animal. He's taxidermying an animal while he's talking to him. I mean, that's not necessarily his fault because when they showed up, but it's his fault that he speaks the way he does, trying to be as creepy as possible. I was just like, oh, okay, this is this eccentric, like, occultist character. Definitely. Kind of wild when Susie's voice is coming out of Mercado as he's flailing on the ground with red foam coming out of his mouth. I like that scene. Another one where I kind of laughed. And not like a full-on laugh, but kind of chuckled at that scene a little bit. But it's just so funny when like her voice is coming out of his mouth, especially when he's like flailing around there and all that foam's coming out. I was like, okay. The focus on the eyes of Mercado and George while they hold hands, that's funny. That was kind of like this, are they falling in love moment? Like literally, okay, so this is how I watch films. Sometimes when I'm watching a film, I will see a scene that I think could be interpreted a different way, and I'll kind of like try to play a different soundtrack in my head. If you watch that scene and you play a different song, make it like a love song, they're falling in love. They're holding hands, making eye contact, and they are falling in love. Just saying. What this film could have been. And there's Fulci playing a doctor in Susie's hospital room. He has had a tendency to do this, to throw himself in there in like bit parts. I talked about it for my Demonia review. He showed up as like an inspector. In this instance, he's a doctor. Doesn't do a whole lot. Gives a line of dialogue. He usually likes to do like a line or two of dialogue at least. And he does. What's the significance of the blood spraying on the wall while Tommy says, "Punish me"? I didn't really understand that scene so much. He's just like standing there. I guess it's like something having to do with the evil spirit, but he's like staring at the wall that we find out is where Jamie Lee is. She's behind the wall and she's dead, and then it's just like spraying blood on the wall. I don't know if it was supposed to be a thing where it's supposed to be like the blood is coming from behind the wall and it's just like soaking the wall through it. I didn't know. And then she like her arm like busts through, which looks good. It looked nice and creepy and gross, like her kind of decaying arm, and I like how it's just kind of like hanging out of the hole. I like that scene. I thought it was pretty cool. I the scene where there's a snake inside of Susie's body, that was kind of an odd choice to me, especially because like it's the X-ray of her chest and stomach, and then there isn't just a snake already. Like they show it to you, and then they like superimpose like a snake onto it. It's like, just have the snake on there in the first place. Like that would have looked better in my opinion. I don't know, kind of weird. Kind of gnarly look at Jamie Lee's dead arm when it comes through the wall. Already talked about that. Okay, the pièce de résistance for this film. What I loved most in this film, awesome moment, the taxidermied bird attack on Mercado at the end. You think that everything's over. He certainly does. But no, the evil spirit's coming for him. It's inhabiting the bodies of these taxidermied birds. So it's kind of like the birds are getting revenge on him in the afterlife, which that's kind of fine. Didn't see that scene coming. And I also like that it's just one at first. And it gets pretty vicious. It's very gory. It's just, there's so much like viscera all over the place. It's a long scene too. And they go really far with it. That's what I liked about it. Like they did a really good job. And then it's just the one, and then all of a sudden others join in, and you're just like, well, yeah, I mean, he's finished. I mean, I thought he was going to be finished with the one, and then the other one swooped in, and I'm like, okay, there's no question right now that he's going to be dead. Sure enough. The quote that he says when they're attacking him. Now, once again, I don't know about like translation and stuff like that with the dubbing in English, but this was hilarious. When he says, "Birds of darkness consume me." It's like he like wants to die at that point. I guess he's just accepted it. He seems like he was a pretty macabre dude in the first place, so maybe he's like always been okay with his own mortality and just thought, you know, I don't know, maybe he's always thought he's going to go out in some sort of like crazy way, and that's a crazy way for sure. And I guess the amulet magically goes back to that woman in Egypt to be given out again, and the cycle continues. You know, George takes that amulet, throws it off the bridge into the water, but all of a sudden, it shows up in that woman with the white contact lenses in her eyes, in her hand, and she's giving it to another kid. So you get the idea that this whole story we just watched has been going on for some time repeatedly, and it's going to happen again. That's the idea you get. So it also seems that the amulet's always going to a child. So it's probably a situation where the evil needs to possess a pure spirit, or like someone who's pure and naive. So that's my thoughts on it, but you can let me know yours in the comments. The film, obviously very well shot. Already talked about that. Really like the way it looks. The concept actually seems kind of similar to Demonia. If you haven't watched that review of mine, it's on the channel right now. You can check it out. The concept is very similar. If you've watched that film, you know what I'm talking about. And the focus on the character, on George being blind in this, also just reminds me of The Beyond, which was before this film, I believe. Yeah, I think The Beyond came before this film. But Demonia came after, like 8 years after, so. But it's just interesting to see how, like, you know, the same filmmaker, potentially the same writers, like, some of these ideas just, they get reused. A lot going on with eyes in this, and you know, eyes are the window to the soul. I think that's why there was a lot of focus on the eyes, because of the whole soul aspect, and in this, obviously, Susie's soul is being lost to this, you know, evil spirit, so it makes sense. This film actually plays pretty heavily on the fears of children turning into people that their parents are afraid they'll turn into, basically. There are a lot of films that do this type of thing, and that's kind of usually what I see thematically in a film like this, where a kid's being possessed in any way. It is that kind of underlying fear that I've been told a lot of parents have, where they want to make sure that they do everything they can to, you know, raise their child as a good person, but also protect them from becoming a bad person. And so it's like literally nightmare scenario if the kid becomes someone else. And it literally, in those moments, like, if they become someone that you don't agree with or don't like, it is kind of like they're no longer the person you raised or person you knew. So the whole possession thing, like, fits in that instance. So I think that was kind of what's at play, and yeah. But overall, out of 5 stars with half stars in play, ooh, I didn't hate this. I'm going to give it a 2.5 star rating. Thought about going 3. It doesn't quite get there. Almost got there with that taxidermy bird attack, but I'm just going to go with 2.5 stars. But know that I considered 3. I did enjoy it enough. But this is where I'd like to hear from you. Did you like it? Hate it? In between? Give me a few, like a sentence or two on your thoughts. Go ahead and put it in the comments. Also, do me a quick favor. Hit subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. It really helps me out. Keeps me motivated, and it's the best way to repay me if you like any video I've ever done, including this one. Also, hit the notification bell button because then you'll know when I'm putting up new videos, which I'm doing at least 4 a week at this point. So I'm putting in work. I'm putting in work for all of you. Regardless, though, thanks for taking your time to watch this video. And until next time, keep it brutal.